captain disappeared inexplicably at an altitude of 10,000 meters. All passengers also fell into a coma. This is the ghost flight that made a sensation around the world. Real event in the early morning of August 14th, 2005 Athens airspace. There was a scene. Subvert the horror picture. Everyone knows a commercial airliner flying silently at nearly 10,000 meters above the ground. In the past 2 hours, this plane never replied to any ground control messages. Fear quickly gripped the Athenian airspace. Everyone has doubts. Is this a premeditated terrorist attack? Or a vicious volley? Due to huge security concerns, the Greek Air Force immediately dispatched fighter jets to intercept. As the fighter jet approaches the passenger plane, the pilot saw a scene. Scalp tingling sight. There are dead signs in the cabin. Nothing happened. All the passengers slumped lifelessly in their seats. There was no sign of the pilot or co-pilot in the cockpit. Just then, F-16 fighter pilot. I noticed a figure in the cockpit. This guy doesn't look like a pilot at all. He was pacing back and forth in the cockpit, like fumbling for equipment, trying to make sense of the situation. In an instant, the airliner suddenly tilted to one side, dived sharply to the ground. Just a few minutes later, the plane crashed into the mountains north of Athens. All 121 passengers and crew on board were killed. What happened behind this tragedy? Why is there no sign of life in the cabin? Why did the crew never respond to the ground call? This event is the world-famous Sun God Flight 522 accident, also known as the Ghost Flight. Early morning of August 14th, 2005 Cyprus Larnaca Airport. 115 passengers with 6 crew members board Helios Flight 522. The destination is Prague, the Czech capital. You need to stop in Athens on the way. Time value remaining. Most of the passengers departed from Cyprus, preparing to spend time in Athens. Fake tourist. The captain of this flight, possessing extensive flight experience, 59 years old. Cumulative flight time exceeds 17,000 hours. Co-pilot, 51 years old. The flight time has also reached 7,500 hours. Usually in an air crash, the lack of professional ability of the unit is an important incentive, but the inside story of this case is very different. The two pilots have flown together many times before. The co-pilot also often complains to relatives and friends. The captain is in strong form. Strict control. Airlines have long been aware of this contradiction. In addition to that, the training records of the co-pilot show that he's on the checklist process. There have been omissions, and this it later became the most critical fuse in the entire accident. The airliner involved was a service aircraft, 7-year-old Boeing 737 airliner. The temperature is cool in the morning. The plane took off smoothly from Larnaca Airport. Nothing unusual happened. After the plane climbed to an altitude of 3 kilometers, the crew made contact with Nicosia Air Traffic Control. The captain applies to climb to a cruising altitude of 10,363 meters. Application approved soon. But when the plane rises to 3,658 meters, the cockpit alarm suddenly sounded. This is a kind of alarm triggered only before ground takeoff, used to indicate that the takeoff configuration is faulty. The two pilots were confused. I don't understand why the alarm sounded during the flight. After 90 seconds, the captain urgently contacted the airline operations center. Feedback that the takeoff configuration fault. Alarm sounds in the cabin at the same time. The indicator light of the ventilation and cooling fan is abnormally extinguished, and consult the specific location of the corresponding circuit breaker. The ground engineer replied that the indicator light is supposed to be off and the circuit breaker is located behind the captain's seat. The engineer asked the captain to confirm the failure. The captain said the light had not been extinguished. This reply confused the engineer. Then, the engineer suddenly remembered before takeoff, officially overhauled the aircraft's booster system, the control switch of this system. It happened to be near the circuit breaker. The captain asked about the engineer. Then asked the captain, is the boost mode an automatic gear or a manual gear? But the captain did not answer this crucial question. Instead, repeatedly asked for the location of the circuit breaker. During the call between the two parties, all cabin oxygen masks automatically fall off. Not long after, Helios Air Ground Dispatch Center completely lost contact with the flight. The aircraft climbed all the way to a cruising altitude of 10,363 meters. All ground contact attempts failed. The airline contacted Nicosia Air Traffic Control immediately. Request the control desk to continue calling Flight 522. Next 5 minutes, controllers keep calling. Airliners never got a response. Subsequently, the control desk contacted another nearby commercial airliner, request the other party to try to call Flight 522. Still fruitless. At this moment, Flight 522 has entered Greek airspace without permission. Continue to fly according to the original flight route. Nicosia Air Traffic Control switches emergency frequency. Repeated call. The plane still doesn't respond. Immediately contact Athens Air Traffic Control. Asked the other party if they have established contact. Also didn't receive any reply. The people on the ground had 2 guesses. One is the failure of the aircraft radio transmitter. The crew can hear the call but cannot reply. The second is that the crew was hijacked. The first possibility has not been ruled out. Athens air traffic control repeatedly signals the passenger plane to descend. The plane did not respond after more than 20 consecutive calls with no answer. Athens air traffic control can only urgently notify the Greek Air Force, inform that a passenger plane has illegally entered the airspace. Reject communication throughout the process. Greek Air Force immediately dispatched 2 F-16 fighter jets to intercept. At this point, Flight 522 turned on autopilot. Precise flight along the predetermined route, missed the prescribed drop point twice. Maintain an altitude of 10,363 meters at all times. At 7:37 a.m. the plane arrived at Athens Airport. Enter the waiting circling route. That's plane circling over the airport waiting for landing clearance. As the plane circled to the 6th lap, 2 F-16s caught up and completed the interception. It happened to be 8:30 in the morning. One of the fighter pilots returned a shocking observation report. No one in the captain's seat. The fighter pilot looks through the cabin side window. Clear view of the interior of the cabin. All the passengers lay motionless in their seats, oxygen masks on their faces. As the airliner circled to lap 10, fighter pilot saw a strange man enter the cockpit. He was wearing a light blue shirt, black vest. Sit in the captain's seat. Put on earphones. Put your hands on the control panel. The fighter pilot waved to him. The man also raised his hand in response, but just a moment later the left engine of the plane suddenly stopped. The fuselage leans sharply to the left, began to fall rapidly near 9 a.m. The plane made another sharp left turn. The right engine also stops running. After just 4 minutes, the airliner crashed into the mountains northwest of Athens. The whole machine was completely destroyed. After the plane crash, investigators arrived at the scene. As soon as possible, carry out surveys. Simultaneous summons. Ask the engineer who overhauls the plane before takeoff. The night before the accident, this engineer completed aircraft pressurization system leak test. During maintenance, he turned the pressurized mode on the overhead control panel. Switch from automatic to manual gear. Forgot to go back to automatic mode after finishing. When the plane climbed to 10,000 meters, the pressurization system is in manual mode, cannot automatically replenish cabin pressure, causing a sharp and continuous drop in cabin air pressure. The human body is exposed to low pressure and hypoxia. The brain only functions normally for 10 minutes. This lack of oxygen is called hypoxia. Lack of oxygen first damages the brain, confuse people, loss of judgment, eventually coma and death follow the process. Before the government captain takes off, booster switchgear must be checked, but the two were negligent. The default switch is in automatic mode all year round. Missed the opportunity to troubleshoot taxi phase after takeoff. They would have had 2 more chances to spot the anomaly, but all lost after the plane climbed to 3,658 meters cabin altitude. Alarm sounds, but the 2 pilots completely confused. The alarm types put the booster fault alarm mistaken for a ground takeoff configuration alert. Backward investigation of irrelevant equipment. Completely ignore the real fatal supercharging system failure. Cabin oxygen mask ejected. When the hypoxia warning light is on, oxygen drip has started to erode pilot's consciousness. They failed to perceive the danger. Not long after, the captain and co-pilot lost consciousness for 10 minutes after the cabin supplies are exhausted. All passengers and flight attendants fell into a coma. Questions arose. The man in the cockpit was briefly awake. Who is the man trying to fly the plane? The survey revealed that he is a passenger with a civil aviation pilot's license, but not the driving qualifications of a Boeing 737. The cockpit voice recorder recorded, "He tried to send out a distress call after the engine stopped, but I made a mistake and forgot to press the launch button. The ground has never received his signal." The investigation committee determined that his flying skills are not enough to fly a Boeing 737. What's more, the plane ran out of fuel at that time. The 2 engines stopped one after another. Even if he made a forced landing, everyone on board will not survive. Prolonged hypoxia can cause irreversible and permanent damage to the brain. Investigators are among the wreckage of the plane. Found 3 of 4 portable oxygen tanks have been exhausted. Prove that this passenger and 2 other flight attendants rely on portable oxygen cylinders. It lasted longer than anybody else. After the plane crash, the global aviation industry has learned a painful lesson, introduced a number of new standard operating procedures. Boeing enhances pilot training, focusing on distinguishing various types of fault alarms code for inspection of enhanced pressurization systems. After the implementation of this new set of regulations, there's never been another ghost flight. An inconspicuous operational omission that led to a tragic loss of 121 lives. The ghost flight crash, sounding the alarm for global aviation safety. Every seemingly cumbersome inspection process, it's all about protecting the bottom line of life. Reverence rules to avoid risks. Keep peace.